They'd already made 2 jokes before the cake even came out. Jasper made the first one about my cat. "Do you bring his fur to the party too, Claire, or just the attitude?" My brother-in-law had laughed, elbowing Mark, my cousin's husband, who chuckled like it was original. The second came from my sister, Vanessa. "It's just so brave," she said sweetly. "How Claire shows up to these things without a single child to distract her. Like, really present. You could teach us all a thing or two." I smiled, thin and measured, and sipped my sparkling water. They'd gone with pink balloons and a princess theme this year. Zoe was turning 6. I had brought a handmade dollhouse and a little envelope tucked into the card with a savings bond inside because I'd been building a small trust for her birthday each year. I didn't say that part aloud. I never did. The cake was still in the kitchen. There were at least a dozen of us in the backyard, the patio strung with crepe paper, the folding tables lined with juice boxes, half-melted fruit salad, and Costco sandwiches. I sat near the edge, close enough to the railing that I could look out at the hedges. I found myself doing that more and more lately, studying the escape routes. Mark asked if I was still doing the pillow thing, referring to the therapy-informed home design business I had built from the ground up over the last 7 years. I said yes, still doing the pillow thing, and bit down the urge to list the trauma centers and group homes we'd redesigned in 3 states last quarter. They didn't ask for more. They never did. I'd already been introduced to 2 of the newer wives as Claire, the cat lady, while Vanessa topped it with a giggle. "She's the one who lives alone and bakes things just for herself." Someone asked, "Still in that same old house?" And I nodded, biting my cheek, because that same old house had been gut-renovated by my team, featured in a small online architecture journal, and, more importantly, was where I built something they couldn't see. I glanced at my watch. She was running late. I shifted in my seat, sipped again. Vanessa was fussing over the cake now, calling for plates, cutting the slices too big, giving the kids sugar eyes. Then came the knock. Not on the door, on the back gate. Soft, quick. I heard it and knew. My chest tightened, but not with fear, with a strange, expansive sense of arrival. "Claire, could you grab that?" Mom called from the porch, already wiping her hands on a towel. Probably the neighbor asking us to keep the music down again. I stood, walked slowly. The world blurred a little at the edges. When I opened the gate, she was there. Navy dress, twisted hair, small sandals, a stuffed elephant clutched tight in her arm. Her eyes lit up. "Hi, Mommy." And just like that, she ran in. Ran past me, down the stone path, into the backyard full of people who had spent a decade pretending I was a cautionary tale. She didn't hesitate, didn't stop to ask if it was okay. She just launched herself toward the cupcake table, and then pivoted, her face bright as she called again. "Mommy, can I have 2?" Every head turned. Vanessa dropped a plate. Mark choked on a sip of soda. My mother stood frozen, one hand still gripping the towel. I walked in slowly behind her. Calm, not smiling, not explaining, just present. This was Mia, my daughter. The one I fostered at 3 years old. The one I adopted 2 years later after her mother, my former client, passed away. The one I kept safe from prying eyes and family gossip, because she deserved more than to be anyone's debate topic or whispered what happened story. I kept her hidden, not because I was ashamed, but because I knew them. I knew how they would measure her story in units of scandal. How they'd reduce my choices to selfishness or performance. But Mia was neither of those things. She was real. And she was standing in the middle of the backyard, licking frosting off her fingers, waiting for someone to tell her she belonged. No one did. So I did. I walked to her, knelt down, brushed her curls back gently. "Just 1 cupcake first, okay?" She nodded. "Okay, Mommy." The words sliced the silence. I stood. Vanessa was the first to speak. "What, Claire? Who is this?" I turned, slow and even. "My daughter." "But you don't have." "I do," I said. Mom stepped forward, voice quivering. "You never said." "No," I replied. "I didn't." Dad, who hadn't spoken to me directly in months unless it was about interest rates or his back pain, muttered, "When did this happen?" "A while ago," I said. They looked at me like I'd committed some elaborate fraud, like I'd smuggled a child out of nowhere just to ruin their party. But it wasn't about their party. It had never been. It was about Mia. Her questions, her growing wish to know who her family was, to meet the cousins I always redirected conversations away from, to see where the cake went and where her birthday never had. So I brought her. And now we were here. I reached into my bag and handed her the small pink headband I promised she could wear when it felt safe. She beamed. She didn't know what she'd just detonated, but I did. And I wasn't afraid. The wind picked up. Someone's plate flew off the table. I sat beside Mia as she took her first bite. She kicked her legs under the table, humming softly. And behind us, the silence began to hum too, Less like a wound, more like the beginning of something that might never go back to how it was. My name is Claire Haddock. I'm 42 years old. I run a trauma-informed interior design firm that specializes in restorative spaces, half therapy, half architecture. I live in a 2-bedroom brick house in the suburbs with a vegetable garden and 2 cats named Simon and Jane. And yes, I'm a mother. But that wasn't always a word I said out loud. For most of my adult life, I was the person people glanced at sideways during weddings, the still single one. The no plus one at family reunions. The woman who got birthday cards with phrases like, "You'll meet someone eventually," and "At least the cats love you," scrawled in pastel ink. They said it with good intentions, I think, as if my life was a problem they were trying to solve. But the longer I went without offering them a solution, no boyfriend, no baby bump, the more they filled in the blanks themselves. At first, it stung. Then it hardened. And finally, it calcified into something I wore like armor. I didn't fight them. I let them talk. Let them nudge me at dinner tables, match me with divorced neighbors, send me Pinterest links to nurseries for future dreams. They never once asked what I wanted. Not once. But that wasn't surprising. They had never really seen me as someone who might make decisions they wouldn't understand. When I started my business, Haven Design Co., my father asked if that meant I was quitting my real job. He meant my work in social services, the years I spent coordinating group home placements and repainting hallways and shelters on weekends. He thought it was a hobby. He called it feng shui for sad people. What he didn't know was that the nonprofit I'd worked for was quietly using my redesigns to improve behavioral outcomes. Kids fought less in rooms with rounded edges. Women in transitional housing reported fewer panic attacks when there were soft fabrics and warm-toned bulbs. It wasn't decoration, it was stability. By the time I left that job, I had a spreadsheet of real impact. I'd helped reduce recidivism in 2 adolescent homes by 17%. All through paint, furniture, and layout. I wasn't doing the pillow thing, I was building healing spaces, on purpose. And I did it quietly, because I knew if I said it too loud, they'd dismiss it as idealism. That's what they did best, discredit what they didn't recognize. It was the same when I started fostering Mia. I met her when she was just shy of 3. She had 2 teeth missing, a matted braid, and a bruise under her chin that no one could explain. She was placed temporarily in a group home I had helped redesign, a quiet, pale blue house with bean bags and blackout curtains. She didn't speak for the first 2 weeks, but she watched. She followed me from room to room with those big, solemn eyes. One afternoon, while I was replacing batteries in a nightlight shaped like a turtle, she sat beside me and said, very softly, "Don't leave me." I didn't. 2 months later, when the social worker called and said they were looking for a home, I offered mine. Not because I was ready. Not because I had the time. But because I had space. That first year, I didn't tell my family. I told myself it was about privacy. That Mia deserved to settle before becoming someone's conversation piece. But the truth was, I didn't trust them with her story. I didn't want her to hear the things I'd heard my whole life, the polite ridicule, the backhanded jokes. And so, I kept her hidden, tucked safely inside the life we were building together. We made birthday cupcakes, just for the 2 of us, watched cartoons with subtitles, built blanket forts. I showed her how to stir soup, how to press plants in a notebook, how to light a candle with care. She called me Claire at first, then Miss Claire. Then one day, Mommy Claire. The day she dropped the Claire and just said Mommy, I cried in the laundry room for 20 minutes. No one else knew. No one else got to know. That was mine. Adopting her took 2 years. There were court hearings, paperwork delays, and one terrifying moment when a distant cousin from her biological family tried to block the placement. But I held my ground, because she wasn't a project. She was my daughter. And when the paperwork was final, we celebrated by painting her bedroom purple. Her story was hers. But our life was ours. So when she started asking about my family, about the cousins and uncles and the lady who sent a Christmas card but didn't write my name, I stalled. I wasn't ready. But Mia was. Don't you want them to know me? She asked one night, curled under the quilt we'd sewn together. And I didn't know how to say, I don't trust them to deserve you. But I knew I couldn't keep her hidden forever. I was the one who told her she could be loud, that she could take up space, that she didn't have to hide. So when Vanessa's party invitation came, with the usual group text that said, "Hope you're not too busy being mysterious this time, Claire," I smiled. I RSVP'd yes. And this time, I brought the best part of my life with me, not to prove anything, but because she wanted to come. I used to joke, mostly to myself, that I lived in a house no one believed was real. Vanessa once said it didn't count as property if you didn't have a husband or a mortgage cosigner. Mark once asked, so like you rent or own or squatting, and laughed like it was charming. My mom asked every Christmas if I'd considered moving into something smaller. To be less alone. I never invited them. I never offered a tour. It wasn't pettiness, it was protection. Because that house wasn't just a home, it was proof of everything they said I'd never build. It had taken me 5 years and 3 renovation rounds to shape it. Not for aesthetics, but for safety. Every wall held decisions made with trauma care in mind. Rounded corners, non-toxic paints, soft-close cabinets so nothing slammed. The guest room doubled as a calming sensory space. Weighted blankets, dimmable lighting, and a fish tank that glowed at night. They thought I played house with cats. They didn't know that my house was used as a model for a design pilot being evaluated by a national child welfare agency. They didn't know my business had quietly expanded into 3 counties, or that my garden had been featured on a mental health podcast episode titled Healing Outdoors, Small Spaces, Big Peace. I didn't brag. That wasn't my language. But I remembered the first time Mia curled up on the floor of our living room and said, "This is the safest place I've ever been." That was all the recognition I needed. Still, there was one room I never finished. It was meant to be the guest room, but I left it mostly bare. Just a twin bed, a shelf, and a folded quilt on the chair. At first I said I didn't have time. Then I said I didn't know what to put in it. The truth? I was waiting. For what? I wasn't sure. Maybe for someone to earn it, maybe for silence to outgrow its use. After the party, after Mia's voice echoed through the backyard and made the adults finally see me, I started thinking about that room again. 3 days after, I got a voicemail from my mother. She didn't sound angry, just brittle. "Claire, we were caught off guard. It was a lot. We'd like to see you. Just talk." I didn't answer. That night, Mia asked if we could light the backyard candles. I said yes. She brought out her sketch pad and colored quietly while I answered emails from a clinic in Maine that wanted to consult on a new youth wing. They had read about us. Someone had forwarded the article from the Architectural Journal. It was happening. Again, quietly, organically. I let Mia stay up a little later than usual. When I tucked her in, she said, "Mommy, are they mad?" "Who?" "The people at the party." I kissed her forehead. They were surprised, but I'm not worried about them. "I'm proud of you." She nodded, drifting off before she could answer. In the morning, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a ceramic mug, the kind my sister collected. Pale pink. It said "Number 1 Cat Mom." There was no note. I set it on the counter and laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so them. Passive, performative. Not a real apology, but a signal. A joke trying to double as a bridge. I left it there. By the end of that week, Vanessa messaged me directly. "Vanessa, Zoe keeps asking about the girl who knew the unicorn trivia. She wants to see her again." I read it 3 times. Then I replied, Mia would like that. "You're welcome to visit our place." It took 3 days for her to say yes. When they showed up, I made lemonade and blueberry muffins. Mia led Zoe through the garden like a tour guide. I heard them giggling in the vegetable patch, whispering about secret fairy spots. Vanessa looked around the house, eyes scanning the walls, the layout, the furniture. "This is really beautiful," she said finally. "Thank you," I replied. She looked down, then added, "I guess I didn't know what I expected." "You didn't ask?" She winced but nodded. Fair, she didn't apologize, not exactly. But as we stood in the doorway of the spare room, still mostly unfurnished, she said, "Is this for guests?" "It was supposed to be," I said. "I haven't decided yet." She picked up the folded quilt. "Did you make this?" I nodded. There was a long pause. Then she asked, "Would you come to Zoe's dance recital?" "Mia too?" I studied her face. The way she avoided eye contact, the way her mouth folded inward like she was chewing something she wasn't sure she should swallow. I said yes, because I wasn't waiting for perfect, I was watching for possible. When they left, Mia handed Zoe a pink stone from her rock collection. "For courage," she said. Zoe hugged her. Vanessa smiled, and just like that, I saw the shape of the guest room begin to shift. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't redemption, but it was entry. The thing about public silence is that it echoes louder than a shout. After Mia called me mommy in front of all of them, the sound didn't stop with her voice. It kept rippling through every face, every pause, every eye that suddenly couldn't hold mine. It didn't turn into rage. It wasn't some cinematic collapse. What happened instead was subtler. Everyone went quiet. Vanessa forgot to serve the cake. My father refilled his drink twice without taking a sip. My mother folded napkins she'd already folded. People smiled in that glazed-over way that says, "I don't know what to do with this." I knew what they were thinking. Why didn't she tell us? Is this legal? Is this permanent? Is she trying to prove something? But they didn't ask. Not at first. Mia didn't notice. She was too busy playing ring toss with Zoe. They'd paired up, made up their own rules. At one point, Zoe shouted, "We're sisters now," and Maya squealed with laughter so pure, so whole, I had to turn my face away. It wasn't until the party started thinning out, balloons deflating, juice boxes scattered, that my mother approached me. She sat down on the bench beside me with a sigh that sounded like it carried years. "She's very sweet," she said, eyes on the grass. "She is," I answered. There was a long pause. "You really adopted her?" I nodded. 2 years ago." Her face flickered. Not anger, not even disappointment. Something closer to grief, maybe. "Why didn't you tell us?" I stared ahead. "Because you've never really asked about my life. Just your version of it." She winced. "That's not fair, isn't it?" She didn't respond. I added, "I didn't want Mia to become a talking point, or worse, another way to remind me I did things wrong." "We would have accepted her," she said quickly. "No, you would have tolerated her," I said. "And that's not the same." She looked down. "I suppose I deserve that." I said nothing. After a moment, she added, "I just always thought you didn't want children." "No," I said, voice soft, "I didn't want to justify one to you." That landed. I saw it in her shoulders. The rest of the party wrapped quietly. Mia fell asleep in the car, head against my shoulder. She clutched her new bracelet. Zoe had given it to her with whispered ceremony, a rainbow of plastic beads spelling BFFL. I kissed her temple and carried her inside, blanket and all. That night, I found a voice memo in my email inbox. From my former mentor at the nonprofit where I used to work. He'd seen a feature on Haven Design Co. in a local online paper. The one I didn't even know was writing about us. He said, "Claire, the way you've grown this, it's what we always dreamed of. You didn't just build something, you made a model. I'd love to bring you in to consult on our new pilot." I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time. Not because I was shocked, but because it was the first time anyone had recognized the house I'd built as more than a fluke. The next week, I was invited to present at a regional mental health design summit. Paid speaking slot. Travel covered. I said yes. Mia picked out the earrings I wore. "They look like little suns," she said, "so you won't forget to be warm." The night before the summit, I got a group text from Vanessa. "Vanessa, Zoe won't stop asking when Mia can come over again. Also, can I ask where you got that sensory swing in her room? Zoe might need something like that. She's been having trouble sleeping." I stared at the message. Then typed, "Me. It's from a small business in Oregon. I'll send you the link. Happy to help set it up if you want." The next day, I stood in front of a room full of architects, therapists, and care workers, presenting slides about trauma-informed spaces. I talked about textures, light levels, spatial predictability. I showed before and after photos of a project we did with a shelter for displaced teens. Then I pulled up the final slide, a snapshot of Mia's room. Purple walls, the bookshelf, the corner swing. "She calls it her brave room," I said. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to explain anything. They understood. When I got back, there was a voicemail from my father. It started with, "I didn't know how to say this before," and ended with, "But I hope I haven't missed the chance to know her, or you." I didn't erase it. But I didn't respond right away either because this wasn't about them catching up. It was about me finally moving forward, and Mia, at the center of it all, was blooming like a secret that had waited years for sunlight. It wasn't vindication that I wanted. Not exactly. I didn't need them to bow or apologize or tell me they were wrong. That would have been easier, almost too simple. What I wanted, what I craved, was for them to finally understand that I had never been a shell of the person they imagined. I had never been waiting to be filled by a man, or children, or convention. I had been building something the whole time. Brick by brick. Choice by choice. Quietly, yes, but deliberately. And now, they were finally noticing. The week after the summit, I was invited to write an op-ed for a trauma-focused design journal. The title they gave it was, "Safety is a Feeling Before It's a Floor Plan." The editor asked if I had any photos of the project that started it all. I sent them the ones from my house. Mia helped me choose them. She sat beside me at the kitchen table, legs swinging, eating sliced apples as I clicked through files. When we landed on one of the living room, sunlight pouring in, her stuffed elephant on the armchair, she said, "That one. That's the one where I felt like we were a real family." I included it. When the piece published, it made the rounds more than I expected. A small blog featured it. Then a larger one. A week later, a contact at a mental health nonprofit messaged me. "Would you consider licensing your designs to clinics outside your region? We've got people asking." I said yes. Not with a whisper this time. And then one morning, as I was dropping Mia off at school, a teacher pulled me aside. "She's been telling everyone she wants to be a homemaker," she said, smiling. I blinked. "Like a stay-at-home mom?" No, she laughed. She told us not that kind, like Mommy, the kind who builds houses where people can feel better. I stood there, holding Mia's backpack, my heart too full for words. That afternoon, I finally returned my father's call. He didn't answer. I left a voicemail. Hi, it's Claire. I got your message. I think Mia would like to meet you too. We arranged a coffee meeting. Neutral territory. No parties, no big reveals. Just him, me, and Mia at a corner cafe near the park. He was nervous. I could see it in the way he held his coffee with two hands, like it might spill if he let go. But he was gentle, patient. Asked Mia about her school. Her favorite color. Her elephant. He didn't mention the years, the parties, the silence. But when Mia went to the restroom, he looked at me and said, I thought I knew who you were, but I didn't. I'm sorry. I didn't say I forgive you. That wasn't the point. I said, I'm glad you're here now. It was the only part that mattered. That weekend, Vanessa invited me to speak at Zoe's school's career day. I hesitated. She sensed it. You'd be amazing, she said. Really, you're the only one in the family doing anything real. I agreed. Not because I wanted to impress them, but because Mia wanted to come. I talked about spatial dignity, about color and light, about how healing sometimes starts with a door that closes softly. Afterward, 3 kids said they wanted to be space doctors when they grew up. Mia held my hand the whole time. That night back home, she gave me a drawing. It was our house, but taller, with more windows, a second story. At the top, she'd written in pencil, Home for Everyone. I put it in a frame. Later, I stood in the guest room, the one I'd left empty all these years, and finally began to plan. Bookshelves, cushions, maybe a small desk. Not for a guest anymore. For the next part of our story. A few days later, Vanessa came by to help repaint. She wore sweatpants and brought cupcakes. As we brushed primer onto the walls, she said, You were always the strong one, you know. I just couldn't see it. I didn't say thank you. But I handed her a roller and said, Let's make it soft blue. And we did. Not because we had to, but because we finally could. There's a kind of peace that doesn't ask for applause. It doesn't make noise. It doesn't demand recognition. It just settles like dusk over a home that was always there, just unseen. That's the peace I've found. Not in their approval, not even in their understanding, but in my own knowing. My knowing of who I am, of what I've made, of who I've become when no one was watching. They used to call me a childless cat lady. They said I was still playing house. I didn't correct them. Not because they were right, but because some truths are too sacred to be offered to people who ask only to judge. Now the house is full. Of Mia's drawings, of mismatched socks, of smells from cookies we forget in the oven. It is lived in, fully. The old mug, the one Vanessa sent anonymously, sits on the shelf now. I use it for pens. It reminds me of what they thought they knew, and what I never needed them to. Mia calls it the house with the brave room. I just call it home. And now, finally, they do too.